Hey guys, how's it going? This is Khavrion, and we're here with another battle report. This is for round 4 of the Vaulsc Tabletop Simulator League Season 4. The mission is a Vaulsc custom mission, Neural Net, and it's going to be me playing Steel Phalanx versus Jmustang playing OSS. And based on context, I can only assume that this is some complicated Neuromancer-style AI warring nonsense for the control of Aleph as a whole. Let's talk about the mission first. Neural Net is supposed to be a button-pushing mission inspired by the classic comm center with 9 AI terminals distributed across the map that you have to go activate. You get 1 point per objective terminal controlled at the end of the game, and you get 1 point if you control more terminals at the end of the game. There's no classifieds, there's no HVTs, it's just button pushing. Here's the layout. The dots represent where the AI terminals are supposed to go, and so it's got this 3x3 type situation. So, pretty straightforward. There are 2 things that make this interesting. First, it gets harder to capture the terminals as the game goes on. Vaulsc calls this the machine learning mechanic. Basically, on the first turn of the game, you get a +3 to the whip roll to take over a console. During the middle, there's no bonus, and on the last turn of the game, you get a -3 to try to push the buttons. I think the idea here is that the machine is getting smarter, and it is harder to control the terminals because the AI is learning. Then as a game mechanic, the idea is that the last turn steal objectives from the other person is somewhat mitigated by the fact that they now have a -3, so you're going to just fail a lot more if you're trying to steal them. The second thing that makes this interesting is this mechanic that he has called encryption. What encryption does is it basically means that each of the 2 players will secretly pick one of the 9 terminals as their secret defended terminal. Unknown to the other player, this secret terminal cannot be activated unless the opponent has all 8 of the other terminals already activated. Not only that, you only find out after you've succeeded the whip roll. So for example, if the middle one were the defended terminal for my opponent, I could run up with a specialist and I could try spending maybe 2 or 3 orders to try to push the button, and I fail, and then on the 4th order I succeed, and then I discover that I couldn't even have grabbed this one all along. So those 2 things are a little bit interesting. Now, while we're here, I do want to talk a little bit about the implications of these 2 parts of the mission. First, because of the machine learning aspect, because it's easier to push buttons earlier in the game than later in the game, I believe that a second group with specialists that can push buttons is virtually required. As you may have guessed from my other battle reports in this series, I will be running the 10 model big boy list, and that does not have a group 2, and in fact it only has 2 specialists. And partly as a consequence of that, I have to choose between shooting the other guy and pushing buttons. On the other hand, if I'd had a Group 2 that is primarily consisting of specialists, then that Group 2 would be able to spend those Group 2 orders pushing buttons and then supporting Group 1, and Group 1 would still be able to go out and fight as I need to go out and fight without having to worry about pushing buttons. Indeed, we'll basically see that I don't push any of the terminals that are closest to me because I just am busy spending orders doing other things with Group 1. So I think having a second group that has button pushers in it, especially close range button pushers, is going to make you able to capture the 3 consoles that are closest to you very efficiently and very easily, especially early on. That said, I've only played the mission once. Maybe this is just a reaction against one particular game, and if you've had a different experience with this mission in terms of the 1 combat group versus 2 combat groups thing, then absolutely feel free to let me know, and I'd be interested to hear that. The second bit is the encryption thing, which, to be honest, I thought was going to be kind of gimmicky, but not that important. I thought it was going to represent one console that kind of didn't really matter, that kind of wasn't going to play a big impact during the game, that it was kind of going to be a lot of work to try to guess which one it is, and then ultimately not have it matter. And indeed, in the game, the encryption mechanic didn't actually matter at all. That said, it could have. Because I was going first, I chose a console that I was likely to control that I wanted to defend to make sure that it couldn't be stolen by my opponent. On the other hand, my opponent chose one of my 3 close consoles, thinking that it was highly likely that I'd try to get one of those. So it didn't actually come up in the game, but I thought there was some nuance to the strategy here. So this selection is actually kind of interesting. It doesn't end up playing a big factor on the game, but I could see that it might be something that is worth considering as a little bit of extra that you can add on top of things. I don't think it's going to decide the game. I don't think it's going to even matter in a lot of the games, but it is, a little bit cute. So that's the 2 special mechanics that are in Neural Net. The last thing that I do kind of want to talk about as far as neural net goes is the fact that the scoring is very zero-sum. Every point that you get is a point that your opponent cannot get. As a consequence, getting a 5+ win is a little bit tricky. Not only that, ties that are close are going to be very difficult to achieve, and it's basically impossible to lose while getting 5 points, because if you have 5 points, well, then your opponent can't possibly have those 5 points. The way that this impacts our particular play of this mission is it means that if I can just really absolutely stomp my opponent, then that's going to stop them from being able to push buttons, which in turn is going to, in some senses, give me better access to those points. The reason I bring this up is because I could easily envision a version of this mission in which when you push a button, you also gain control. So you're not stealing it from your opponent, you're just also gaining control. And then that would lead to the mission being a little bit higher points. And it would also mean that there's a lot less, shall we say, confrontation over control of these consoles. And instead, it has more to do with who can push more of them throughout the game. I'm not saying that that would necessarily be better, but I am saying that the mission you're about to get a battle report for was extremely bloody, and part of the reason it was extremely bloody was because I really just desperately needed to make sure that my opponent would not be able to push any of my buttons at the end of the game, lest they, steal my consoles and win as a result. If the game hadn't had that aspect of stealing them, then it would have been more of a button-pushy mission, at least in this particular playthrough, whereas as it stands, yes, there was button pushing, but killing was a major factor. That said, I've played the mission once, so maybe experience will change these things. I'm actually going to talk about my opponent's list first. Now, if you watched the last battle report, you'll recall that killing my opponent's specialists and keeping my own specialists alive ended up being a pretty significant factor in how that game went. In this particular game, my opponent is bringing so many specialists that there is virtually no chance that I could even possibly have a hope of killing all of them. In fact, I can't even significantly limit the coverage of his specialists. I can't kill like all the specialists on the left half of the board. There's just so many of them. He is running a Dakini link with a Diva. In that link, he has Trisha, who's a specialist, CSU, who's a specialist, and a Diva Paramedic, who's a specialist. Also in the same group, he has an Evo hacker, which, technically is a specialist, and a Naga hacker who's going to start in the midfield. Then in group 2, he is running a Naga killer hacker, who's a specialist that starts in the midfield, a Proxy Mark 1, a Proxy Mark 2, and a Proxy Mark 5. So that's like 8 specialists. It seems like half of his models are specialists. What that means is that if I'm going to have a serious chance at actually limiting his ability to push my buttons in the last turn of the game, then I feel like I need to kill orders. And also, considering the situation, that means I think I really got to kill a lot of orders on the very first turn of the game. Now, that said, I do think that going so heavily on the specialists ends up meaning that the list is kind of fragile. Almost everything that you can see is basically going to be one wound. The proxies, I guess, have NWI and the Nagas have Dogged, but it's still the kind of thing where I really only have to, punch once and I'm going to be able to take out a lot of the stuff. The Dakinis are survivable with their 2 unconscious states, as is the Samick, but, if dudes are getting knocked unconscious, they're not generating their orders, and then it's going to take you orders to get them back up, command tokens to get them back in the link. So this list does have some brittleness to it, I think. This is especially true if I'm trying to just punch straight through it with a guy who's really strong like Achilles. If I'm going to take Achilles and I'm just going to run straight through, he's not going to have anything tough that Achilles is going to have to, bounce off against. I think something like the Proxy Mark IV with a heavy rocket launcher might be an example of something tough. It's got decent armor, it's got decent range, and Achilles really can't afford to just blow that thing off, or else it might shoot him and then he's on fire, and that could be some pretty significant limiting factors here. That said, I'm not an OSS player, I am a Steel Phalanx player, and from the perspective of Steel Phalanx, pretty much everything in OSS, pretty much everything in infiNity looks fragile compared to Ajax, so, maybe I'm just showing my bias right there. Anyway, that's my opponent's list. And here's my list. Once again, I'm running the big boy list that I stole from XNED. It's a really fun list. It's got 10 models and like 13 orders. Everyone's really tough. It's got a lot of flexibility. I like the list in general. But I'm not sure that it's going to be particularly great for this matchup and this mission. First, I only have 2 specialists, and in a mission like this, coverage matters. Normally, I like to have the freedom to include Akmon and Machaon in the same link, or to choose to leave Akmon out. With this mission, I basically have to leave Akmon on the other side of the board, or else just accept that I'm not pushing buttons over there. Next, I kind of don't like to bring Hector along into the midfield and leave him there when there's so many hackers that are around. But if Akmon's not on the link and I want to get a 4-man, then I need to include Hector. Another issue is that Phoenix is basically the only long-range gun. Now, that's not a super big issue when you think about how much I have Eclipse Smoke and smoke grenades and that kind of thing. But it does mean that my opponent can afford to leave out things that are a little bit longer ARO than you might normally leave out, and I'm just going to have the possibility of squandering orders shooting at them. Phoenix is pretty good, and Mimetism -6 is also pretty good, but Burst 3 is just not that much in the way of winning a face-to-face. You can very easily have situations where you're just applying that Burst 3 and it's just not happening. You're just not succeeding. And if there's a long-range threat that you need to shoot at, I mean, Phoenix is kind of your only option, so you need to be prepared for a lot of that whiffing. Also, you know, it's only group 1. So if I'd had a second group that would go out and push buttons, then I wouldn't have any of these problems. So, you know, that's that. That said, I mean, it's all the heavy hitters in Steel Phalanx. I like it a lot, which I've already said, and it will be successful at being extremely aggressive. But if I'm going first in this mission, I kind of feel like I've got to be aggressive, and, you know, that's what I end up doing. Alrighty, I guess it's time to talk about the map, huh? This is the map. It is clearly a simulation taking place within an imagined landscape. Both of our factions have plugged ourselves into the Matrix, and we are warring for control over the Aleph as a whole. The metaphor that is being used to express this very real, very significant, yet truly virtual combat appears to be some sort of moon base. And on that moon base, the Aleph AI node that we're trying to control is distributed across these 9 AI terminals, and we gotta push buttons. At least I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. So it's a pretty map, which I've come to expect from Vol. It uses light in a kind of a nice way, which again I've come to expect from Vol. It is actually a remarkably symmetric map, though. Neither side is particularly favored. On the side that we are looking at, we have this as sort of a nice tower that can see stuff that way and that way, but it's sort of mirrored by this spot on the other side. The other thing is that there are these towers that are in the middle, these 3 towers. And if you can climb up there, then you can get access and really see a lot of the deployment zone for both sides. And you can also park a hacker up there and feel pretty darn safe because these buildings are quite tall. They're like 6 inches tall, which means that you're going to have to spend significant orders getting up there. Against an opponent that was less competent at shooting than OSS, I might actually have considered just parking Phoenix up there, trying to kill the other guys, you know, MSV pieces, and then just letting Phoenix sit there with his heavy rocket launcher. But that's not what's going to happen in this particular one. I basically need to avoid the towers because climbing up there is too costly, and I'm not good enough at shooting to get up there. So this is the metaphor that is being used to express the virtual data conflict for control over the Aleph artificial intelligence. So my opponent wins the die roll, I think, and chooses to choose deployment on the other side of the board. I think that's a fairly solid choice, especially considering, you know, how many specialists he has. I decide to set up accordingly. I have Netrod, Flashball Spot. I then set up my Nomatarkos here. I have withheld, in this case, Achilles and Akmon. They are going to go over here once I kind of see what my opponent is doing. But I'm thinking by deploying the link over here, I'm thinking that I can kind of run up this way. I'm thinking I can use Eclipse Smoke to shut off any long-range lines, and I might be able to push some buttons as I advance. And then I'm thinking once I get close, I'll hopefully be able to attack with Ajax or something like that. I'm aware that there's highly likely to be hackers in these towers, so I am thinking that if there are hackers in these towers, especially the proxy hacker, then I can actually go around this way and then get to this side, and then I've actually got some pretty powerful raking lines of fire along this side that I might be able to take out. That's what I'm thinking. We do have to note that Hector is in this link, though, and that means that I'm bringing my very vulnerable to hacking lieutenant out into the midfield, and that could cause some problems. And here is my opponent's position. His link is set up kind of over here like this. He had withheld the proxies and the Samick. He has a Shukra, which is his lieutenant. The Shukra is right here. It has Strategos, so you can withhold extra ones. The Samick is right here. You'll notice it's just sitting on a box. It's not going to be in cover. If I can get some verticality on it, that will turn out to be a problem. And then he put down his proxies. He has a proxy FO right here and a proxy hacker right here, and those two are attempting to protect this lane. Remember, I put Achilles there, so they're thinking that they'll stop Achilles as he runs down here. Also trying to stop Achilles is this Flash Pulse bot and this Cable Marker, which is a Naga Killer Hacker. On the other side of the map, CSU, Trisha, Diva Spitfire, it is a little bit on ARO duty. I think he's thinking that if I throw smoke, the Spitfire is going to be nice to have. Dakini Paramedic, Lamed Flash Pulse bot. I think that's the HMG. This is a Netrod, and then this is the Proxy Mark 1 hacker. Oh, yeah, and then actually in camouflaging up here, this is the Naga regular hacking device. So let's get started. Based on this deployment, I'm thinking that I could have basically one of two strategies. I could either take these guys and I could attack as best as I can, or maybe I take these guys and attack as best as I can, or I try to make a few choice kills and then push some buttons along the way. I am kind of thinking that this left side is a little bit weak, but this Flash Pulse bot here is going to be a repeater. That's going to make it tricky. And then in this particular picture, you don't see the proxies, but once the proxies are there, there's a proxy here, which might hack Achilles if he tries to run through. And then, of course, there's a proxy FO back there who has the EM grenades. So I'm initially thinking what I'll do is I will run up, I'll try to push some buttons while the +3 is good. What I'm going to try to do is kill what I can. I'm hoping especially to be able to take out his dangerous attack pieces. The missile launcher I find particularly dangerous just because of how damaging, burst 2 AP explosive hack buffed stuff is. And then if I can kill the Diva, which he, left out here, that also is going to mean that his MSV is significantly reduced, and that's going to make Phoenix a real problem. So based on those two options, I'm thinking my strategy is going to be take Phoenix and see if I can go attack those key pieces and then try to push some buttons as I continue to advance. What I am able to do is I notice that there is a line from here to here which sees the Diva. Now the Diva had intended to see the ground, but up here it's going to be longer range. So what I do is I take this link and then I actually jump Phoenix up to here so I can see the Diva. Here's a picture of the jump. I didn't actually get a picture of the gunfight. The gunfight, unfortunately, does not work out great for me. I don't take any wounds, but I'm just not able to stick anything onto this Diva. What I'm hoping is that I will beat it. I will force a save. It will be fire. The Diva will keep burning. I'll burn through its NWI, and now I've knocked the link down to a 4-man link. What actually happens is that Phoenix just rolls above a 13 almost every single time. I think on 3 orders I hit once or twice or something like that. And then the Diva just tanks all the armor saves. I'm also trying to shoot down the left-hand lane here. There's a Flash Pulse bot down there. And once again, Phoenix, I think he takes 2 orders to kill the Flash Pulse bot despite me being in good range. So that's a little costly. It's a little frustrating. But it is something that I do need to be aware of. Phoenix is only burst 3, and when I'm using Phoenix in these circumstances, it can very easily happen that Phoenix just doesn't do the job. When you only have 3 dice, the dice can easily go against you. Basically, about the only thing I accomplish other than killing the Flash Pulse bot is I do decide to take a risk. I'm thinking I need to take care of that Samick. I do not want to have a hacker come up, target my boys, and then eliminate them. So what I basically do is I take Phoenix and I run him up to here. Meanwhile, I've taken Hector and run him across the bridge over there. I think I threw smoke with McCann or something like that. And then I'm going to have Phoenix engage the Samick. And we recall the Samick is standing upright. It is not in cover, it's just up high. So Phoenix is going to be burst 3 on 16s, and my opponent is going to be burst 2 on good range, but in a full link, but he's going to be at a net of -3. And that net -3 actually turns out to be super important. My opponent rolls like a crit and a hit, except they don't crit and hit because of this -3 penalty, and Phoenix manages to get 2 hits, and it does manage to take out the Samick. It's not dead, it is merely unconscious, but I do take out the Samick. So there's that. The problem is, I've spent a lot of orders, I'm terribly exposed out here, and I'm just looking here thinking the Alpha Strike that I was hoping to happen is just not happening. My opponent is going to push buttons. If I spend my orders retreating, it's going to be really bad. So I decide to take a big risk and go for a really aggressive. Basically end up doing is taking Achilles and Akmon. I use Akmon's tactical awareness order to slingshot Achilles up the board. Achilles has stealth, so he can bypass this hacker. I've killed the Lamed Flash Pulse bot as well, so there's no repeater there. So Achilles can basically get all the way up here into this corner before anyone can see him. And because of how fast he is, that basically takes Akmon's tactical awareness order, and then Achilles' just regular order once he gets there. So then Achilles gets there. What's between him and the Shukra is a proxy FO and a Naga. And that's about it. The proxy hacker is also there, but it turns out the proxy hacker is something like 0.4 inches off for being outside the zone of control. So the proxy hacker can't actually hack me. However, the important thing to recall is that these are proxies. Only one of them can give a meaningful ARO. So either he's going to hack me, which is burst 1 on a 15, which is pretty good, but Achilles would reset, or he's going to be able to use the proxy FO to toss an EM grenade. He ends up doing the proxy EM grenade because the hacker's not in range, but he would have had to choose between those two options. So while it does seem like there's a decent defense, Achilles is able to bypass a lot of it with stealth, and then once he gets there, he only has one risky order where he basically runs across way out into the back line over here, and that one risky order is the only real risk for him to get stopped. And that's pretty much what he does. He basically just runs across. I basically run out. I put all 4 bursts of my AP Spitfire into the proxy FO. I let the killer hacker shoot me with a combi rifle. It hits. I tank the armor save, and then I use the guts to get me a little bit 2 inches extra of movement. And then I spend the last order once I'm over there basically running around. I get eyes on the Shukra. I put all 4 shots into the Shukra. I kill the Shukra, and thus putting my opponent into loss of lieutenant. So this was an extremely risky play with Achilles. It was a bold play, though, and fortune favors the bold, and it did work out. Here is where Achilles ends up. This is where the FO was. I killed it. This is the proxy that wasn't quite in range. This is the Naga Killer Hacker. This is where the Shukra was. This is the Lamed Flash Pulse spot, and I did get hit by a combi rifle and take a wound. But Achilles is sitting there. He is frenzied. I think I did forget that he was supposed to be frenzied up until the states phase of my turn, or the order count phase, so that was a whoopsie on my part, but it turned out not to matter. We actually went back and checked the dice rolls, and it turned out not to matter. But do remember that frenzy now happens during the states phase. I actually did know that, but in the moment, there's a lot to keep track of, and I was very frazzled because of how risky this run was, and I just didn't remember, so that was my bad. But this is Achilles. He does see, this line. He is still alive, and he's done a lot of damage, and my opponent is now in loss of lieutenant. That could, in many ways, be the story of what happens here. But there is sort of a play that is important to bear in mind. And the reason that it's important is because of Hector's positioning. Hector is right here. Ajax is right here. Phoenix is right there. And Machaon is back there. So Hector is really far forward. And what my opponent can do is basically take this hacker and run up to try to see Hector and try to hack him. He's like 0.2 inches off in the one order that he has in order to pull this off. And then he can also take this proxy hacker and run the proxy hacker up to here and try to Oblivion Hector as well. Now, my opponent is in loss of lieutenant, and the 2 net rods, which are veteran, are in group 2. So his group 1 does not have a lot of orders, and I've stripped this down to a 4-man by killing the Samek. So he's not going to have as many orders to actually do that as he might like. But it's still something that's a big risk. If Hector gets isolated, I'm in loss of lieutenant, I lose his extra order from Strategos, extra 2 orders from Strategos. I have my 2 veteran orders from the Netrons, but geez, I'm still really in a bad way. But before that, my opponent is thinking that Achilles is an issue. He's basically going to spend all of his group 1 orders dealing with Achilles. He basically reforms the link, I think, with the Diva as well. I guess he probably moves the CSU in, forms it as a 5-man, and then rearranges and uses a bunch of orders to shoot at Achilles. He ends up putting 1 wound on Achilles. Achilles fails guts and goes to here. He then takes the Naga and brings the Naga forward and tries to shoot Achilles. Achilles doesn't get shot. I think he tanks the saves or wins the face-to-face or something like that. So Achilles is left with 1 wound remaining and survives, and my opponent has spent all the command tokens and the lion's share of the group 1 orders trying to accomplish that. So that worked out really well for me. After he does that, he then takes the proxy to try to go hack Hector. He takes the Naga up here to try to go hack Hector, and that that doesn't work out for him. He basically has 2 hacking attempts because he's got 3 orders, 1 for the proxy and then 2 for the net rods. He moves the proxy out and then he moves to hack Hector, and I crit my reset, which is nice. And then he hits me again with a hacking attempt. He's burst 2 on 12s because I have a tin bot, and if it succeeds, I have BTS 6. It's damage 16 AP, but reduced by 3 again because of the tin bot. So each Oblivion die that gets through has a 50-50. So it's not that crazy for Hector to survive this, but it is, it's lucky for me that he survives this, and I think that makes up for the bad luck in the attacking at the beginning. Oh, speaking of bad luck, there is one other thing that happened. He does use the Diva to shoot at poor Phoenix, who's on arrow over here, and Phoenix just gets blown away. It does work out for me. I think I win the face-to-face or something like that, but this was potentially a worthy play because you might be able to actually kill Achilles. Other than that, I think this is pretty much the setup at the end of my opponent's turn. To give a little bit of commentary, my opponent spent a lot of time thinking about what to do with his turn, and he decided that Achilles was the threat to prioritize on. He knew that he could either go after my Link, specifically Hector, or he could go after Achilles. He's in Lost Lieutenant, and so that's a real problem. But he decides killing Achilles is more important than going after Hector. And even with that consideration, he's still able to make a pretty serious threat on Hector. And so I think, in my opinion, in my read based on the aftermath of this situation, I definitely think it would have been better to spend those command tokens really trying to isolate Hector. That would have been so damaging for me. Leaving Hector that far forward, especially when there were so many hackers available, was just an absolutely ridiculous mistake to make. That said, I do think my opponent thought a lot about what to do, and Achilles is very dangerous. What we're basically going to see is that Achilles is going to just absolutely rampage. However, it does kind of, make us recall that we have to think what could have been done, and I think the better thing to do would have been to go after Hector. I'm going to speed up here because I think the game is largely decided in my favor based on the fact that neither Hector nor Achilles were taken out. Basically, Achilles is now impetuous. Being impetuous, he gets to do whatever he wants with his impetuous order. Basically, what he's going to do is he's going to waste this Probot, take out this Net Rod, kill this Naga, kill this Flash Pulse bot, and then he's even going to run up to here and try to have a gunfight with other stuff as well. At the same time, I'm basically going to take this Link, and I'm going to start to do some damage. Actually, I have a picture of it. The first problem actually turns out to be his hackers. So I'm going to take Machaon, and Machaon's going to run up to here. I think I try to push a button back there and fail, and then Machaon runs up and succeeds at pushing this button, and then he runs into melee contact with the proxy. The proxy, I think, dodged towards Machaon. I'm not sure why the proxy was dodging towards Machaon. I would have been able to get into melee with him anyway, but he dodges towards Machaon. Machaon gets into melee with him, deals 1 wound. I then reform the Link and basically beat up the hacker here with Machaon again. So I'm able to deal with that hacking threat that frees up Hector. With Hector freed up, I'm then thinking about Achilles. At this stage, Achilles has taken out the Net Rod and the Probot and the Naga, but Achilles is not able to go after this Lambent or go after the Link. What I want to do is I need to take out this Dakini, and what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to take Hector, and I'm going to shoot the Samek's corpse with Plasma, and the Plasma explosion is then going to hit the Dakini. Of course, to be able to do that, I do need to take out this Naga. So what I think I end up doing is I think I end up running Machaon up there, and I attack the Naga with Machaon. Machaon heals himself along the way. He took a wound from the template of the proxy downstairs, and he kills the Naga. So once the Naga dead, I can then activate Hector. Hector can run up. Hector can blast the Samek. Samek template hits the Dakini. That frees up Achilles to run out here and try to deal with the Lamed there. Once the Lamed is dead, he doesn't have to worry about getting hacked, so he's able to swing in here and he attacks the Link. All of that was a little bit for nothing because he ends up shooting at a Dakini paramedic in cover, and he doesn't have cover anymore, and he just makes no progress. But I have done a lot of damage still, and I haven't really lost a lot in the process. The only other thing I think that I do is I've got Akmon back here somewhere. Oh no, I hit him back here. Akmon's going to use his tactical awareness to run up to there. So here's the aftermath. All told, I did a ton of damage, and I've left my opponent with not a lot of orders and a lot of problems. Problem number 1 is Achilles. He's going to use the Dakini to eliminate Achilles. He's going to use Trisha to fix up the Dakini HMG. And then I think this proxy is going to walk downstairs with the 2 orders that are left in that group. But that's pretty much it. My strategy of do lots and lots of damage to my opponent's order pool has been a smashing success. And at this point, I think there's not a lot that my opponent is actually able to do. Here is Achilles right after he got shot. Here is the proxy walking downstairs. I thought he was going to go push a button, but actually he ends up moving to here and being in cover in an attempt to stop Akmon's button push. And I believe this is the situation at the start of my turn. I have Akmon up here, Hector over here, Ajax down there. I have 1 console pushed. I tried to push this one, but I ran out of orders or failed the roll or something like that. And if I want a major win, I need to have 4 of these things at the end of my turn. To accomplish that, I've lost basically 2 guys, so I have 10 orders plus Akmon's tactical awareness. This is, in fact, a tough situation. Because of the -3 associated with rolling, I actually have a really difficult situation in terms of being able to reliably push 3 buttons. Not only that, my opponent still has stuff left, so I need to deal with that as well. Primarily, I need to make sure that he can't push any of my buttons on his turn, or else that'll be a significant problem. Still, I've got lots of orders, and if I do have to take a minor win, 4 points or less on a win, I think that's pretty much okay. I think that should be easy enough to happen. So basically what I do is I take Machaon as the link leader, I run downstairs and I push this button. I then take Akmon and I run over here to push this button. Once I get there, I declare a discover. I'm planning on basically doing a discover plus button push, but my opponent doesn't realize that. He thinks I'm going to discover shoot this guy, so that dude reveals and shoots Akmon. It turns out shooting Akmon was a really good thing because this is my opponent's, secret console. He thought I was going to kill my guy, and here I am not pushing the button at all, even though I planned to discover push button. So a little bit funny there, but it does work out for me. I don't actually kill the proxy at this stage, but the proxy has been revealed. So now that I've revealed the proxy, Machaon moves into the middle, pushes the button. Ajax comes with him. Ajax shoots at the proxy. Ajax doesn't kill the proxy either. I think he tanks all the hits. And now I'm sitting here. I'm sweating a little bit. I'm running low on orders. I've only pushed 1 of the 3 buttons that I need to push. So what I do is I take Machaon and I run him up here. And as I'm running up there, I am eating an ARO from this Dakini HMG, and I decide, you know what? I've got NWI, I've got 2 wounds, mimetism -6. I can afford to take this risk. So Machaon runs up, and my opponent shoots, and he rolls an 11, which is a miss, except Machaon's targeted. At the moment, we actually didn't realize Machaon was targeted. I actually spent my whole turn pushing a whole bunch of buttons, and at the very end, my opponent was like, wait, Machaon's targeted. So we went back, we checked, it was a crit, and I was like, oh, shoot. So we roll, Machaon fails both saves and dies. We were able to re-rack and reset. My situation is very dangerous right now, though. I've now lost Machaon. I'm short on orders. I still have those 3 buttons to press. It is going to work out for me in the long run. I basically am able to blow away this dude with... I move Akmon into melee with that dude, and then I bring Ajax in and explode him. And then with my remaining orders, I'm able to push this button over here, push this button over here, and at some point along the way, Hector is able to shoot at one of these dudes with his plasma, and so I killed the Dakini HMG that had been resurrected, thereby avenging Machaon, and I also splashed Trisha. She tanks both saves, so that was kind of lucky, but I am able to do that. So things are very grim indeed when my opponent starts. With the re-rack, I've basically got these 4 consoles. My opponent has 3 orders left and a lieutenant order. I've got my dudes camped out over here with this arrow. My opponent is basically going to run over there, cautious move, and then try to push this button. With the lieutenant order, the lieutenant was the CSU, whip 12, and it unfortunately fails. But even if it had succeeded, I still had my consoles, and this console was my console. I was thinking I want to make sure that it's safe. I actually anticipated an outcome sort of like this, where my Link ends up not defending a button that I pushed, so I thought I'd defend it. But it does work out okay. And that's pretty much the game. So I think the TLDR, in my opinion, that really matters here is that the last turn success was basically contingent upon the fact that even with Phoenix and Achilles down, I still have a ton of orders in Group 1. left to go do stuff like push buttons. So even with misplays like throwing Machaon out there to die, even with misplays like running up with Akmon and then not pushing a button and instead getting locked in melee, that was a little bit less of a misplay because I couldn't have pushed the button in the first place, but you get the idea. Even with all that, I still had enough orders to push these 3 buttons, to do a little bit of damage, and to camp up an ARO. So it was a ton of orders. That said, if I hadn't gotten Lost a Lieutenant on my opponent on the first turn of the game, I think I would have lost. That paralyzing stroke really, really afforded me a huge advantage. It made up for all the bad luck that I had during my first attack, all the bad luck that I earned for myself by choosing a dumb strategy with Phoenix. And when my opponent tried to pay that back to me by running the hackers up, the fact that the Oblivion failed to isolate Hector, that was really crucial for me as well. I don't know the odds. I think it was mildly supposed to happen for my opponent. I don't think it was outrageous that I survived, considering that it's only 2 orders. I mean, very much analogous to the Phoenix situation, right? But even so, it was very lucky for me that that didn't happen because it would have been so bad. So ultimately, this was very much a bloodbath of a game. It largely was a bloodbath because I couldn't stop all of my opponent's specialists. He had so many of them. It had to be a bloodbath for me to have a hope of success. There might have been an alternate path early on if I could kill some key pieces and then push some buttons and then command arrows with Phoenix, but I didn't. So it turned out being just a really savage mission that was determined by me slaughtering my opponent, basically putting him into retreat on turn 3. Not that there's retreat in this mission, but you get the idea. So yeah, that's Neural Net. It was supposed to be a button pushy mission, I guess. Didn't end up being a button pushy mission, ended up being an attack mission. I personally kind of like this mission a little bit less than EDX Ops, but I would happily play it again. I think it's a perfectly fine mission, and there is some nuance to it that is worth considering. Anyway, that's that. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you again soon.